Here you go, guys. This is the new dance. We're calling this the crane shuffle. Hey! Hey! Da ba da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba ba. Hey! Ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba ba. Yay!
Off mic 1 and 2. Awesome. Yeah, back on the FGC podcast, Salt Shakers, NZ homegrown. But this time I'm grabbing another Australian player, the legendary TAJgarou. We were just talking about the clip, the intro. I just said, it was very funny, very ideal. I was like, that's so you in your mode. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Give us a brief rundown as to who you are, what you're all about, what you do.
Yeah, no worries. Well, first and foremost, thanks, Drex, for inviting me to the podcast. I feel like being able to be given the opportunity to come to do any of these podcasts is always an honor. So yeah. So the basic introduction, I should say. My name is TAJgarou. I am a fighting game enthusiast, TO, streamer, all-around fighting game fan, and been basically playing fighters for probably since the age of 6, but more consistently been playing since 1999, since Third Strike came out basically. But I guess the way how to describe sort of my story of how I got into FGC, we kind of have to look at it in a sort of like a pre-FGC and a middle FGC and post FGC.
Okay.
So the way how it is before I joined, I was always playing fighting games, whether they be at the arcades or getting arcade ports on consoles like the original Xbox or the PS2. So yeah, during the quote-unquote dark ages of the fighting game scene of the 2000s, I was always playing. So always trying to find whatever new fighting game was coming out, and just something that piqued my interest, whether it be like a play style, a character, even the lore of the games themselves. So, but for those who may know me as well, is that nowadays I'm predominantly an SNK guy. So I'm sort of repping the Oceania scene, or trying to sort of let people know around the globe that our region definitely has the fandom, the excitement, as well as the high level players who definitely need to be given the spotlight. And I try to do that with my platform.
Yeah.
So then how that relates to how I became an SNK fan actually is basically in the year 2003. So I remember coming across 2 SNK titles that were, I guess you can say, the eureka moments of where I sort of immediately fell in love with SNK games. And that was King of Fighters 2003 and SVC Chaos SNK versus Capcom, which, as a fan of also arcade games and collecting arcade games, I have those 2 PCBs of those arcade games.
Wow.
So my introduction to SNK basically started with those 2 games. However, obviously in the 90s, when the Super Nintendo was pretty popular, I oblivious that in the video stores where I used to rent out games, fighting games mostly, I would rent out Art of Fighting
Yeah.
and Fatal Fury. So, and I thought that those games were made by a company called TAJgarou, but then upon realization, TAJgarou was the company that did the ports for those games, and then I found out that they were SNK games. So in reality, I started playing SNK games basically during the Super Nintendo era. So when I was about 8, 9 years old. constantly renting out Art of Fighting because it was something I enjoyed. The fact that there was like a story element to it. And I also had issues renting Fatal Fury 2 or Fatal Fury Special is because every time I go to the video shop, it was rented out.
Yeah.
So I always had to rent Art of Fighting.
Dude, I have that same moment. Like, there's that one game that you want to get at the video store when, you know, they were around. And yeah, you want to continue. And you're just like, for God's sake, who's this dude that keeps taking up the next game?
Yeah. So that's basically, I feel like, there was the moment where I had the Eureka moment, and then there was that time where I just didn't know that I was playing an SNK fighting game. So I guess those kind of games were like where it all sort of started for that appreciation for fighters. But as I've mentioned, I sort of advertise myself as a fighting game enthusiast. So I'm happy to like talk about like fighters of all kinds. So obviously, like anyone who came into the scene, like I started off with Street Fighter, like Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo, but then sort of I really sort of got my fix for competitive play was when Street Fighter 3 came out in 1999. And like my local arcade used to have tournaments and stuff, but like the play level was nothing. Like people were trying to play the game like it was Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
So like I had the slight upper hand. But yeah, I guess taking it super seriously, like playing like winning competitions and that never really sort of was my intention back then, because I was always preoccupied with studies and sports as well, which we can talk a little bit later.
Yeah.
So I guess you can say like most of the 2000s, the pre-FGC era, before I joined the FGC, I was still playing fighting games. But yeah, I always, regardless, I would try any and every, whether it be Street Fighter, Tekken, Soul Calibur, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like even early anime fighters, or like it's just like anything I could get my hands on.
Yeah, that's pretty rare. I mean, we all play various fighting games, but it's rare that you find someone in the scene that really cater, they really support all multiple fighting games if they're specialized in one thing. Can I ask, with SNK, do you feel like the relationship for SNK games, because you know you have your Street Fighters, you have your Tekkens, your Marvel players are crazy, but how has SNK, because I feel like King of Fighters has been around for years, but I feel like there's still a lot of people that don't know. You were talking about that rich history and the essence, the characters, the play style. It's really interesting seeing this new game come out now, KOF 15, and how Street Fighter players are touching it. Certain 3D players are as well. Like, what's your insight in terms of the relationship, how people view SNK fighters? It feels like people are really discovering SNK, you know, cool game, you know, just the essence of SNK games.
So I feel like how they feel about SNK in general is that it was a company that made great fighting games, but they like unintentionally made them like difficult. Like the execution aspect of it was always something that was more sort of a bit of a deterrent for like people new or like people who play other fighters who wanted to get into it. But for anyone who does play like KOF, can explain to anyone who's new to KOF that like things that you've learned in like other fighting games can in some way be transferred into the KOF series. Obviously, there's like a bit of contention about like, oh, like the buffer system in SNK games is out of whack. It's like it's not normal.
Yeah.
But for anyone who played those type of games for many years, you know that that's just how it is. It's like you put the matter of practice in. But one other great thing about when you see like not KOF, when you see Street Fighter or Tekken players or even anime fighter players try something like the latest King of Fighters, is how they're applying different tactics from how they play the other games into a KOF. So they're almost wanting to learn the way how KOF is played, but they're always throwing in their own touch into it. So as an observer of someone who plays KOF and understands like the quote unquote legacy skill, it's kind of refreshing to see how they approach the learning process, how they approach a matchup, um, uh, how they use their already fundamental knowledge and understanding of fighters and then apply it into something like King of Fighters. But in general, like SNK, definitely from like a gameplay perspective, has always been sort of been perceived as like difficult, like hard execution wise. But as far as like characters and personalities, it's always had the appeal. Like, I mean, look at when you go on Twitter or something, you'll see people do artwork for King, Jeremy, like the female cast, as well as the males as well. Like, there's just love there, and then it's just, yeah. I guess that's what I can say with regards to that relation of how other players have to SNK games.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Tekken player, and I know that Tekken Tag 2 wasn't the best part in that franchise's history. What was that part for King of Fighters? Like, what was that point in that franchise's history that seemed like, did it ever have a troubled time, in terms of like development or being received by players?
I mean, if we're to talk a little bit about like the history of like King of Fighters, like I think any game that's been released in the series, some have been received more positively, and then others have been maybe criticized or maybe just lambasted because they just weren't up to scratch or up to par. Um, I mean, there's definitely been a few games in the mainline KOF series that have sort of dropped the ball. Like the general consensus is that KOF 2000, not KOF 2012, I was going to say, yeah, KOF 12, I should say, is the one that's sort of perceived as like the black sheep. It was like heavily rushed. It was like one of the games that was supposed to celebrate the 15th anniversary of King of Fighters, and it was advertised as the rebirth of the series. And by that time, we haven't had a King of Fighters game probably for like 5-6 years, with the last one coming out on the Thomas wave on the KOF 11. So yeah, there was definitely high expectations for KOF 12 to do well, but unfortunately it bombed. It didn't have anything, and it was definitely like a rushed development. So that's for more like modern KOFs. But then back in the sort of the 2000s era, for anyone that knows, that the first rendition of SNK went bankrupt in 2001. So KOF 2001 and 2002 were developed by ELF, which was a Korean-based company. And like 2002 was definitely like a great game in its own right, while 2001 was still falling on the marks of what KOF, the NES saga was with the Strikers. So there definitely has been like tumultuous development time for King of Fighters, and obviously now with King of Fighters 15 come out now, which was originally supposed to come out in 2021, but then got pushed to 2022 because of various reasons.
Yeah. And how has things been with you with like COVID and everything, bro? Like, have you had to change? Like, has it affected you that much, or everything's?
I mean, if we're asking like the actual question, like, are you okay?
Yeah, are you okay?
Then
Yeah.
yeah, no, I've been okay. So I've had like a number of people like ask me like, how are you coping with the like lockdowns, like no offline events, and also many other things. I've been doing it pretty well. Like obviously there are times where you do just want to get together, go to like a pub and like have a drink, talk
Yeah.
about life, talk about music, talk about games. Um, I mean, as far as like FGC side of things, it's missing going to offline events. It's just mainly because the like restrictions, and then also the fear of catching COVID and then not being able to work. So you also have to prioritize: do you go out and have a social life, meet with a crowd of people, and then a chance of catching COVID, or you play it safe you stay at home, you isolate, and you do something else to
Yeah,
pass the time.
that's
So
true.
yeah,
But hey, with that rollback netcode though, like it must be really great playing at home now. I
it
It's
is.
really good. It's really good netcode, that game. I'm really surprised.
Yeah, like King of Fighters 15 has definitely sort of delivered as far as like the online match, like the online play. Like it's from the first beta that had some like one-sided rollback issues, and then they resolved it in the second beta. Like King of Fighters 15 definitely has is in a good space with regards to like the online play. There are just a couple of little nitpicking things that people address, like the matchmaking could be a little bit better. But I think SNK are aware of those issues, so they are trying their best to resolve those so people can find each other, whether they're doing casual matches or ranked matches.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, on the topic of like quickly on the rollback situation, obviously, right now like most of the attention is on King of Fighters 15, but obviously with the start of the pandemic of in the 2020, then SNK sort of started to consider, okay, we should probably start porting or getting this rollback netcode into our other games. So um, dealing with COVID also kind of helped me sort of expand my like streaming capabilities. Because prior to that, when like King of Fighters 14 was a thing, I would only kind of stream maybe once a week
Yeah.
or something like that. But then when like SNK started to come up with this news that like games, their Code Mystic ports are going to be getting rollback netcode, then I thought, okay, now I have a chance to stream these games and to show people these amazing games that I also personally love as well. So games, obviously, Garou Mark of the Wolves. Kind of
Classic. Mm.
that's kind of like a classic, and it's kind of become like a signature of me, and like people come to watch me play Garou and talk about it. Last Blade 2, Samurai Showdown 5 Special, like many, and even like the latest, the KOF 98 UMFE and 2K2 UM, that those games have been out for much longer than the Code Mystic ports, and they basically add rollback netcode and the addition of lobbies, which we're still waiting for Garou, Last Blade 2, and SamSho 5 Special, which would be a nice incentive, but yeah, I guess SNK right now are probably prioritizing the post-launch content for King of Fighters 15, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But it would be nice that if SNK does give the Garou fans like spectating and lobbies option in Garou Mark of the Wolves
Yeah.
Code Mystic port.
Well, you just mentioned KOF 14. Did you dig that
Yep.
game at all? It it handled pretty nice. I wasn't. I guess when you look at 14 and then the characters in 15, like some characters look like they've been completely transformed, and it's just the minor touches, like looking a bit more buffer or just altering the default costume in a sort of way. Did you dig King of Fighters 14?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just at that point when KOF 14 got announced and like the news that was coming out in that year was like it means yes, we're getting another KOF in. It meant that there was hope that SNK are going back to making console games and rather moving away from their other shady business ventures,
Yeah.
pachinko.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I was really happy with the gameplay wise. Obviously, the conception is that people always bag on the graphics when the game got initially teased, but I feel for a game that uses an in-house proprietary engine in comparison to Unreal Engine, what King of Fighters 15 using, I think it's definitely it was a good solid effort from SNK for King of Fighters 14, but it's definitely like a major graphical improvement, and also like character presentations on like the finer details, like their idle animations, how certain features of characters have been maybe emphasized or de-emphasized, depends how it is.
Yeah.
Like presentation, I think the SNK definitely put it up there as like it had to have a good presentation, not just like the like the character models and that. And obviously the debate there is, oh, there's just recycled character models. When you have a game that has that big of a roster, you kind of want to reuse things like small elements of those models and then fine up those touches so when they are implemented into a new engine, they can really pop and like work really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who personally looked good for you? Who translated from 14 to 15 very well? And it doesn't have to be a visual thing. It could just be like, as you said, it could just be like little minor aesthetics. It could just be their game plan itself. How it just, I don't know, just which character took it out for you?
I mean, there's just so many great characters. I definitely feel like a major improvement is making the characters really like you gave them more personality with the details that the new KOF game has. Like maybe cloth physics are one thing, which is pretty good. But I mean, if I have to say like one character that I feel has such a great new redesign or like looks really good that really surprised me, it's probably Antonov.
Antonov,
like, yeah, because Antonov, like, he almost looked like a generic sort of businessman in a way, and like you felt like you didn't have a connection with him. Like he was like this selfish, like self-proclaimed champion of the King of Fighters tournament, and just I don't know how people connected with him in that version. But then once I saw that trailer for Antonov and I saw that he had a hat and the sunnies and the scarf, my immediate thought, like many fans who are also fans of professional wrestling, was like, man, that is so Randy Savage, the Macho Man.
Literally.
Ooh, yeah. So like, and that just that change in the design really, I think, made people really appreciate that. Like Antonov is more than just like this kind of selfish guy who thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But yeah, no, it just that kind of transition made me have a bigger connection and appeal to the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apart from KOF, what does Taj do in his spare time? What does he do when he's offline, out of the scene?
So what am I offline, out of the scene? Okay, so what I do is, so I am also a musician in my spare time. I'm not sure if you can see the guitar in the background there, but yeah, I am primarily a guitar player. I am also what you class a multi-instrumentalist. I do play bass guitar and drums. Most of the time, I am kind of working session work here on the Gold Coast with friends who need someone on guitar, or bass, or drums for accompaniment. Yeah, I earn a little bit of money here and there, doing it for fun. For a while, during my time in the FGC, I was kind of in and out of the community, trying to sort of push a bit more, sort of like my music ventures. Basically trying to focus on a music career, essentially. Yeah. But that didn't work when you have 3 or 4 projects that you're trying to juggle, which even to this day, I'm still kind of juggling. So
can you give us info on one of the projects you're juggling?
Yeah, I can do that. So when I started, after I finished high school, I went into TAFE. So I went for 1 year into music, like a music diploma, basically, technical production. And I saw the revelation of electronic music, like the potentials, the sounds, the possibilities, the sonic possibilities. And in that year, in 2006, I came up with like an electronic alias that I use. So it goes by the name Static D. So I was completely oblivious that there was a hardcore punk band called Static X. But I said, well, I'm just going to call myself Static D because the motif and sort of like the signature of Static D was more like perfection and imperfection. Like rather than going for like completely polished sound, something that sort of encompasses what like electronica is. Like it has interference, it has static, like not all the time, but in some kind of way. And in a way sort of inspired by like the sort of like the electronic sounds that I kind of like. So like the ambient sounds of Brian Eno, sort of the old school sampling beats of Moby, DJ Shadow, like instrumental hip hop kind of inspirations, new age music as well. So like Static D doesn't have like a particular sort of electronic style. It all changes, like hip hop, trip hop, down tempo kind of vibes. So I've had that project for a while. And then the other project, which is more rock music, which I recently started, is a project that sort of takes inspiration from like the Balkans, which is where my nationality is at. Um, so the project is called Velika Shuma, which basically translates to the Great Forest. So combining folk, rock, blues, and fusion sort of music, and I'm still sort of in the process of arranging, writing demos, and also working with a friend of mine who's working on the lyrics. So I guess those two projects are the ones that I'm sort of focusing on at the moment. And then if music that I work for those projects don't sound like those things, then I generally just release them as myself, like my own music.
And I'm guessing, being a fellow creative, you have your own process in terms of how you work to create those sounds between your different projects.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it all depends like what instrument you use. So like you have to sort of put on one hat, take one hat on, put another one on, depending on like what you're doing. So if you're playing a piano, you got to think like this. When you play a bass guitar, you play like this. You play drums this way, you play a guitar this way. Well, with a guitar, you can kind of do almost anything and everything because the instrument is so versatile in that regards. So yeah, there's definitely a process. The idea is just generally with any sort of creativity or any art is to not force the creativity. Like let it happen organically. Whether it's a sound that I heard like walking with friends, if I'm on the ocean, if I'm on the beach, like I listen to like various sounds. If in the forest, I listen to like the different soundscapes and just try to see what sort of inspires. But a lot of the stuff that I make is more sort of instrumental focus. So it is very sort of focusing more on like sonic textures, timbres, very much inspired by like Brian Eno, who sort of pushes the music in a more kind of intellectual way, but tries to get you to feel something. Not in like a scientific way with someone like Robert Fripp from King Crimson, who just intentionally wants to make complicated music that sounds dissonant and difficult to listen to. But don't get me wrong, King Crimson is a great band, and Robert Fripp is like a visionary guitarist himself, so which I take inspiration from as well. But yeah, the process is just different depending on like the style of music you're making, the instruments you play, and then you have to take into consideration the people that you work with. But obviously, in the last couple of years, it's mostly been working on my own with the occasional gig.
Fair enough. Well, what's been your most favorite, area? What's been your favorite location to perform?
Favorite location? Wow. I got to think of like all the venues that have come and gone. Here on the Gold Coast, I forgot to mention, if you guys don't know, I'm on the Gold Coast here in Queensland. We've had venues definitely come and go in the last few years, but I mean, my sort of personal favorite from the first band that I played in was a venue called the Shark Bar. So that's where my band, I think, we got our first gig, our first paid gig, which was in in Miami, like the suburb of Miami here on the Gold Coast. And it was like this long stretch bar. The sound was terrible. The sound engineer would turn you down unnecessarily. if he feels that you're like pissing him off.
Yeah.
So, but like I mean, when you're a young band, you kind of have to learn that. Like, and you learn that you have to respect the sound engineer, like,
Yeah.
or else they will make you sound horrible. So, for not for me personally, but for
Yeah.
my friend who was in the band of my first band that we played in, yeah, he learned that the hard way, and he was the front man. He was the singer and rhythm guitarist. So people are saying, the rhythm guitar was a little bit quiet, and his vocals you could barely hear. And I say, oh, just blame the sound guy. My friend had to go at the sound guy.
Wow.
Live and learn, mate.
I don't know.
Live and learn.
I think about like bands when you're performing and you're starting up. Everything leading up to you getting on stage is always terrible. It's like, oh, the waitress brought our food. It was overcooked. There was no toilet paper left in the toilet. You know, she overcharged me $30. But then when you get on stage, it's, you know, you're doing what you do and you love it. And then it's back to the whole, okay, they just lost my luggage at the hotel. I got to go pick it up. Nah, it's crazy.
Still waiting on the tour, actually. Like most of like as far as like touring, like my first band that I played in, like we only went as far up as Brisbane to play. So like in the many years that I've played music, I've mostly just been playing like Southeast Queensland, and yeah, I mean I'm enjoying it. I mean one day I would definitely like to like get into a van and
Do a circuit, eh? Yeah.
Like do a circuit, like let's say drive all the way down to Sydney, like or even Melbourne, which would be quite a while. Drive all the way down south, start the tour down south, and then work our way back up. That would be like the dream, but I don't know if people do that anymore because like
Everyone
digital
digital
music,
and people just fly now. Like they don't do like the typical road band, you know, trip thing.
Yeah, it's not the same, I think, because I mean you fly, and then you have to then bring your own guitar on a flight, and like the fear that your guitar can get broken, and the airline doesn't have security for it.
You want to play a little tune while you're in the air, but they'll be like, "Oh, well, sorry, the passenger behind you just wants quiet."
You can't
so,
do that. Yeah, it's just when you're in a van with 3-4 other guys or gals, you want to just be able to work on music while you're on the road. Let's say from here to Sydney is about 10-11 hours, so you can get stuff done.
Yeah, get a couple of songs written.
You can even record some stuff on a phone.
Yeah,
and it'll sound good quality. Not like demo stuff. Like you can use it on recordings.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought of that. The kind of that culture of music, making music, like being in a car and just actively creating stuff. But yeah, nowadays it's just all on the internet and documented, I guess.
Yeah, it really is a bit of a change. I mean, because like for guys like you and I, like we're of that generation that sort of grew up with like CDs, cassettes, like vinyl. I mean, for me, it was mostly cassettes and CDs, with my folks having some vinyl. But like to see that everything is now becoming digital, like there's less importance on the physical product. And like the ideas of albums not being as important now, being more sort of single focused, and EPs, like 4 or 5 track EPs, which is understandable because I think it's a matter of attention spans. Like the attention span has definitely changed for for everyone. I don't want to say just the younger generation, but everyone's attention spans have changed a little bit.
I guess it goes without saying, but would you ever want to have music of yours on a vinyl?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely like to, whether or not the album or 45-inch single is like a concept album or something. I would like to have it just for like memory's sake. It would be really nice.
Do you have a favorite album or artist that just...
So I did briefly mention that with my project Velika Shuma, which is inspired by like the music of the Balkans. So a lot of my favorite bands and like inspirations for the instruments that I play are sort of like ex-Yugoslav rock bands from the 70s and 80s. Bands like Bijelo Dugme, Divlje Jagode, Grupa Smak, U Grupa. Divlje Jagode, Crvena Jabuka. There's like so many these bands from like the former Yugoslavia that inspired me. Um, but a lot of these bands were also inspired by like the British rock scenes as well. So like bands like Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
like the progressive rock bands of the 70s, like the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and then obviously the Beatles and Stones, and most likely the British musicians like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, all those were inspired by like the American blues music, the R&B music as well. So like inspiration from inspiration from inspiration. So like for me, it started with the Balkan musicians, the ex-Yugoslav musicians, who then got inspired by the British, and then
Yeah.
the British got inspired by the Americans. So it's like that's kind of how sort of like the music, like what my inspirations are. But as far as like picking like which is like my absolute favorite band or favorite album or that's kind of a little bit difficult because I did also study music as well. So while doing like a multimedia degree, I did do some like music courses, like also with my TAFE course years and years ago. So I've learned to sort of appreciate music in various different genres. So it's very, very hard for me to
To
say
pin one. Yeah.
what's my favorite band. But I like I'll give everything a listen. And if it intrigues me, great. If it doesn't, then at least I can say I had a listen. It's interesting.
Oh well, thank you for going into that for that music stuff, Taj. With we'll bring it back to KOF slightly.
No worries.
Well, SNK title, Sam Showdown, because first time I met you, you came over to Nationals 2019. SamSho was at a really good place then. Shamir, Blackout, and a few other players were really like pushing the game, and you were hosting your regular tournaments. And every now and then I'd pop in and watch. And there was a good turnout, obviously, for Australian and New Zealand players. You do the same thing with KOF currently. What was it about SamSho that made you want to fuel that game and just push it? Was it just simply the love of the game, or was it the love for SNK?
So I guess the story about why I wanted to sort of get more eyes and more people playing Samurai Showdown early days is because I felt it was a modern game with a modern game look, but it felt like a game that was made in the 90s. And I guess the appeal of the setting, I guess, like the samurais have always been something that I've admired in Japanese culture, like the history, the the fact that the characters in Samurai Showdown are inspired or homages to like folklore heroes of Japan or like the historic samurais and everything else. But so I've always had an interest in the game as a kid. Um, but I guess for me it kind of started with SamSho 5, like on a whim. I basically bought SamSho 5 on the PlayStation 2, and I saw, oh, this is a fighting game with samurais. And then, would you know it, I basically fell in love with the series there and then. So, and this wasn't SamSho 5 special. This was the SamSho 5, like vanilla version of the game. And upon like learning about the history of the series and like for it being like the pinnacle or the premier weapons fighting game kind of intrigued me as well. So there's like a lot of things to love about the game, the series, the characters, like the fact that hits do a lot of damage, like the pressure, the amount of patience that you need in order to play the game uh, more competently. And on that topic of patience, I think like Samurai Showdown just teaches you the best kind of patience, because if you don't have it, you'll lose 70-80% of your life, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's been some of your greatest moments hosting those Samurai Showdown tournaments? You used to do them like once a week or once every 2 weeks. They were quite regular.
Yeah, so myself and a fellow SamSho player, a player who got into FGC with the interest of playing Samurai Showdown of Lasta, he started a circuit, or like was it like a 10 games, 10 tournament circuit, like with league points and that, called the Shinobi series. Shinobi series because his main character was Galford, so he wanted to have it
Yeah.
emphasize that. So per week basis, yeah, we were hosting the Shinobi series. Prior to that, we also had Shinobi Strike, which were all sort of last sort of wanting to promote SamSho, but just needed somebody to kind of help in the like the streaming and the commentary side of things, because some people want to focus more on playing the game, being competitive, rather than the whole sort of commentary entertainment aspect. So yeah, no, we definitely had, like, early on in the tournaments, we've had like great players enter. Um, like obviously Henry Gangsa was coming in playing, who is technically still the reigning SamSho champion in Australia, because we haven't had a major like offline tournament to crown another champion. So he technically is still the technically the the inaugural champion of SamSho.
I see.
So yeah, um, so like we did the online tournaments, and we tried to, like, the first week was good. Like we had like 20 plus entrants, I think. But then as time dwindled on, I think the sort of having to deal with the game's like online infrastructure definitely started to sort of grind on people's nerves, and their patience was actually wearing thin. Unlike a game that's supposed to teach you patience, I think dealing with the online was definitely slowly a deterrent that sort of um, forced people to move on. Um, so yeah, it really is. It is a shame, because a game, a modern looking game like this that has a classic feel, where the mind games elements and the meta of this game is just so unique to anything else that was released in 2019. It is really, I feel it is a shame that the sort of like the issues and various things haven't been resolved. Obviously, there are ways to circumvent that, but obviously that can be a little bit complicated and costly. I feel Samurai Showdown 2019 will go down as one of the most underrated games of 2019, or the decade, the 2010s.
Yeah.
It seriously is. I think it's one of the really good, maybe one of the best weapon-based fighting games of the modern time.
Yeah, because at the time when I was like when it was still around, you had that and Soul Calibur, and I guess shouting out Soul Calibur, it went through something
Yeah.
similar where like it just kind of slowly dropped out of view, and
Mm.
that's how it appeared to me with SamSho. It was just like a week, like it gave it a week, and there was just nothing. I think the last update I saw was for a character announcement, and then it just went quiet. But obviously, COVID played a huge part in
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I just like it. Just the game just fizzled out, and it's really sad to see games like that. Soul Calibur, as you mentioned, weapon-based games, like they had their own niche, but they still,
Mm.
yeah, it was almost felt like a crime against nature that they
Yeah.
weren't able to continue.
Yeah, it really is a shame that they couldn't keep the legs, couldn't keep the engine rolling as much. Obviously, with the last character release with Baiken, I think people were sort of thinking, like, once Baiken is out, and then once they fix maybe some bugs or issues, then maybe that'll be it. But it was interesting because SNK are technically still somewhat supporting SamSho, but on different platforms. So
Yeah,
obviously the latest quote unquote version to come out was the Xbox Series X version that allowed you to play the game in 120 frames, which is in a way kind of revolutionary, because fighting games have always been 60 frames per second, right? So, so it seems that there's definitely been some missteps, I think, in the how Samurai Showdown was sort of promoted, sort of the business decisions. But in a way, it was kind of a hard learned lesson, by SNK, the fact that they learned what they can and cannot do with regards to releases, which definitely then helped in with getting King of Fighters 15 in a much better space.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a lesson that they needed to learn. Definitely some business decisions at that time about trying to get the game on as many platforms, and then obviously for certain regions that sort of have a PC crowd, that's always been an issue as well. You have no idea for a guy who's been trying to push the game for a year and a half, for as long as I could. Always having my chat filled is like, when's PC?
Yeah,
When's
when's it available on
PC?
Steam? Yeah.
When's
Steam.
Steam? Like, yeah, like I mean, even when it did come out on Epic Games Store, like I bought the game because I wanted to support it. I tried to push for lobbies or to get people to play. It was literally just myself and maybe 2 or 3 other people who were like in and out, like they weren't consistently playing. And then we just reverted back to playing on the console because at least for my old PC that I have here, I wasn't able to optimize it to a point to get it to work. But trial and error, I guess.
Yeah.
You learn that kind of stuff. But I do hope that there is still hope for Samurai Showdown, because obviously it seemed that that game was destined to have a very good offline presence.
Yeah.
Because it seemed that netcode wasn't a priority, because how would we all supposed to know that there was going to be a global pandemic in 2020? So it's even though at that point there was like the community conversations about improving net play, that kind of stuff, but now it's changed. So we're going to wait and see what SNK and what future companies were going to do with regards to that. But I do hope when things do improve that there will still be room for like an offline scene, get together, chat, play some sets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the success of KOF 15 would really help. So I guess we'll go back a month, maybe a few months before. I've got a clip of you here playing Mark of the Wolves. So the build-up is, it's ramped up for KOF 15. What was your opinions on it at the time? Because you had tried the odd... I think, did you try the first and the second beta?
Yes. So yeah, for King of Fighters 15... oh wait, we're talking about KOF 15, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I have tried the first and second beta. So obviously the issues with the first beta was that there was a significant one-sided rollback, where when playing cross-platform between PS4, PS5, and then also PS4 on PS5 via backwards compatibility, that there was some issues there. These things would happen as well during the beta, so I was glad that they were able to sort out that aspects of it. Like hardcore players were definitely saying that the game, some aspect of the games was maybe a little bit too strong. Like for example, throws being really strong. So if you like time in, you get like a jump in, and you hit like the head of the opponent and you land and you get thrown out of it. So like you'll notice that like people that were new to the game were relying a bit more on throws or throw punishes. So that was always seemed like an issue, but then I think it was like a conscious design decision that they wanted to add to that. And then with the second beta, universal praise is the second beta definitely resolved a lot of the issues, giving us a lot of the new characters to try. I definitely enjoyed playing as Antonov in the second beta. I mean, me being a little bit biased towards characters like Terry, Blue Mary, so that was probably my more favorite beta period to play because those characters were out. But yeah, the prior experience before the game came out has been universally good, and then also when I did the online tournaments during those betas, also received quite well. And shout outs to the current online champion Chen Chen.
Chin Chin, the man.
The man.
Yeah, no, I personally like the game. I like how it plays. I like the battle mechanics, and if we hadn't had Geese in Tekken 7, I don't think I could have appreciated King of Fighters 15 for what it is. Like understanding like that's how max mode works, and that's how the combo, that's how the structure works with managing meter. But overall, like if you gave the game a rating 1 out of 10, 1 being absolutely obnoxious and 10 being the god of fighting games everywhere, what would you rate it right now?
So rating it right now, as I did mention previously, that there is still some small issues with regards to matchmaking. So like that's more from like the online perspective. As far as like single player content, I think there's definitely enough there for players new to the game to understand like the lore, the story, the characters. So I'd say, I mean, there's so many various things we can discuss if you review it. Gameplay, presentation, the music. Oh, seriously, the music in King of Fighters
It's
15
actually
is
good.
so
It's
good.
really nice.
It is so good. And the fact that you can unlock the music from other KOF games and other SNK titles as well is so good. Like me being a fan of Fatal Fury, I want to unlock that music and then put certain stages to have Fatal Fury music. But like the default music, what King of Fighters 15 has, is really good as well. So yeah, it's so good. So if I was to like rate it on sort of based on my experience of what I've had so far, I definitely give it a 9 out of 10. Uh, like I said, there's definitely some aspects, like the more technical aspects that can be fixed, like under the hood kind of stuff. But as far as like the gameplay, the mechanics, the base roster, I think it's definitely a good package. There's just something for everybody here, and there's just so much to do. Like I feel like you find 3 characters, you get good with them. Okay, I'm good with these 3 characters. Can I uh, can I go and play another 3 characters? So you getting consistent one team after another, after another, after another. So there is a full package there, which is it's amazing to say that there is stuff there to do from like a single player perspective. But it seems like with obviously with the pandemic and the focus on online play, they're definitely pushing for more the online kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To encourage more online tournaments and for SNK to support TOs doing online tournaments and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. They just brought out the Street Fighter 6 trailer, and you can tell that has a more of an esports vibe. Basically, any fighting game that comes out now is going to have some esports vibe / influence. Do you see that in King of Fighters 15?
I want to say, I mean, I want to kind of say that I'm on the fence on that aspect of it, but that's largely coming from a player, a fan, an enthusiast who kind of grew up with sort of like the grassroots mentality of like competitive fighting games. The way I see it is SNK should definitely push King of Fighters 15 to be on that level of like esports, supporting it, prize money, getting sponsors. It's just a way to really test the mettle of like the variety of players in different parts of the world, because we all play differently. How people in Japan play differently to how players play in Taiwan. How players in China play different to players in Pakistan. How players in United States play different to Mexico. How South America plays different to North Africa or something like that. There's just so much variety, so it'd be good to get all these like international players together. Obviously, once things open up and people are allowed to travel, I think that'll be the go-to point. But just as a note, SNK did try to do like an esports focus when they did the SNK World Championships with King of Fighters 14. They had players from all around the world come along, but I think from memory at the end, it was predominantly a Japan and Asia affair. But I know for a fact that there are very good, strong players like in places like Morocco, good players in like obviously Mexico, Brazil, I mean everywhere. There's like so many great players, and I mean obviously the I mentioned Pakistan before as well. Like Ainsland Ash, who is renowned for as like Tekken God, Tekken royalty. The guy was prior to that he was predominantly a KOF
Yeah,
player.
that's where he got his name.
That's right. So him now doing like Ash combos in KOF 15, the install super ones is like a and maybe seeing the expression on his face, like the
Yeah, that
guy is loving
her install
loving the
might be
game.
breaking the rules just not even by a little bit, but that's just like what you link. You can link your normals and your supers together, like
Uh,
incidentally. Yeah,
yeah, it's I think I want to say it may get nerfed, but it to me it doesn't feel like it's that difficult to do. I mean, I can't do it personally because my execution is not as great as what it used to be. It's a bit rubbish.
yeah. Well, actually, one thing I do like about King of Fighters is how they change the focus. They change the protagonist in a way. So, like, I didn't know this. You know, like Ash and K Dash and
Mm.
Kyo,
Yeah.
and then with Shunei, like I read this interesting comment about when they announced when they looked at the Street Fighter 6 trailer. You know, Ryu
Mm.
had his hot beard look, no shirt. I think
Mm.
he's wearing Akuma's jandals, and someone forgot which video, but someone said that that's how you evolve the character. How do you
Mm.
evolve a franchise like King of Fighters 15? How would you evolve a franchise like King of Fighters 15 if it needed to evolve?
If it needed to evolve. Well, I mean, how the game and how the series evolves is based around the sagas essentially. So every game had a different protagonist, was like a chapter, like the story chapters of that. So like Shunei is the protagonist of this series, whether people like it or not. Uh, he his stylings and that is definitely meant to attract that specific crowd. And I don't know what sort of the mindset was behind like why Shunei has this particular sort of styling, color choices and that, but it's a style of fashion or a style that I think Westerners are not familiar with from my understanding. Um, but that's how King of Fighters evolves. I think the series evolves not so much gameplay wise, but like from character wise, based on each of the sagas. So you have the Orochi saga, which had like the three games that focused on defeating Orochi. Like Orochi got resurrected by the Hakusho, Genetz, the leader, and then you had Jeremy, Chris, and Yashiro were a part of the Hakusho. And then after that game finishes, you have Kyo who gets kidnapped, who was the first protagonist, gets kidnapped by Nests. That initiates the Nest saga, and then there's the whole story there. And then SNK, I think, definitely took a gamble, like when they made Ash the protagonist of the Ash saga. So it really is a gamble,
Yeah,
that changing the protagonist each game and how it evolves. I mean, with how Street Fighter is doing it, I think by having Luke be the last DLC character before Street Fighter 6 comes out, rather than just giving us a brand new protagonist, I think that's definitely a smart move. Gradually letting people know, okay, we're now transitioning from Ryu. Ryu will always be in Street Fighter, but now we need to pass the reins.
yeah,
The reins, the way how SNK passed the reins from one protagonist to another, it's not like, okay, here you go, you're now the protagonist. It's like I am now going to step on the backs on the wayside or something like that, because the characters that were previously protagonists in the older sagas still have some kind of relevance to the story, because it all circles around the like the notion of Orochi,
yeah,
basically. So like that's, even though Nest's job in that saga was to take over the world through Kyo clones, in some way or form it all circles back to Orochi.
Nice. All right,
Yeah.
man. Well, I'll circle it back to KOF in terms of the DLC announcement. So, yeah, you can quickly go over as we review it. So, the first, I guess, DLC team for the game. I mean, were people really surprised that, your boy R. Howard made it?
Well, I mean, when you see Team Garo, and Rocky was going to be in the game regardless because they had the assets from 14. So, and the fact is that this character is like a shoe-in for like a DLC purchase. Like people will play this character, they'll figure him out. It's got some new moves, obviously all sort of relating back to his Garo form, which is really good. And plus his Raging Storm looks pretty sick too. Gato has definitely been a bit more of like a polarizing character. His KOF 11 version has always been a nightmare to deal with. But after I saw the trailer and I saw some of the stuff that he can do, I was like, oh no, here comes trouble. We thought that Ralph and Vanessa and all the other characters who are now like really strong. I think these first renditions of DLC are going to be really, really strong. Like Gato definitely looks strong. Janet's been like asked many, many years. Again, her last appearance being in KOF 11, she definitely seems like she retains a lot of those elements of her. She's just a fan favorite. And I love that SNK are just giving love to the Garo characters, because it means that we could be getting maybe Garo Fatal Fury news, and then to see her climax be the El Mademoiselle, which was the God Cancel hidden super in Garo, now being a climax. It means we'll be seeing that super a lot more often. It's beautiful. And then obviously, being a fan of Fatal Fury and I go for protagonists, I am generally not a fan of Geese Howard, Billy, or Yamazaki, mainly because they're bad guys. Like, I love them as, like, they're cool. People find them cool and appealing. Me, personally, from, like, a story perspective, like, I'm not a fan of them.
Yeah. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan from Geese and Tekken 7 either.
Yeah.
Hell no.
Yeah, so I think the package that they've announced for the 12 characters for the first year, I think is going to be a really good incentive for people to stick with the game, and then surprises to come. You never know. Like, we'll be getting probably just not King of Fighters 15 years, will be other news and announcements, collaborations. So, like, you never know. Like, this year, like, 2022 is the year of KOF, literally.
Yeah.
So
Tekken's dying down, Street Fighter's dying down. Like, this is the best time for KOF 15. Yeah.
Yeah, like, absolutely. Like, if you were to ask me the question, like, what's the best time to get into King of Fighters, this is it. Like, this is, if we in the SNK community, KOF community, can get a year to ourselves, it would be this. But I mean, that's just me being a little bit biased, a little bit selfish on that, because we want to be polite and let Guilty Gear Strive happen, still let Tekken happen and Street Fighter V happen, and then obviously other games as well, obviously Melty Blood as well, and I mean even platform fighters as well. We got to give them the spotlight as well.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up now, man. I'll give you the spotlight. I will give you...
Okay. Final round questions. All good.
Oh, there we go. All right, just some final round questions to end the night. Okay, first one is, what's your favorite music ballad?
Oh, is there a pass option?
Yeah, you can pass if you want.
Yeah, again, music-related questions are hard to ask me.
Nah, no worries. Next one. What's the worst mix-up situation you could possibly be in while playing KOF 15?
In the words of Chen, the Clark Vortex. Yeah. That, like, the worst mix-up situation, or like guessing where Clark's gonna be, I think, yeah, we'll call it the Clark Vortex. I think that's probably like the worst mix-up.
All right, next. Any thoughts on the recent Street Fighter 6 teaser trailer?
I'm curious whether or not Street Fighter 6 is using RE engine. That's my thoughts on that.
And what's the next goal or achievement you're aiming for?
So as far as like achievements and goals, like ideally I do want to continue promoting SNK games and like the SNK community here in the Oceania region through streaming, maybe hosting events, and just letting everyone around the world know that we have passionate people who love these kind of games, and and also continue to spread it in a more sort of positive, optimistic way. Because I always sort of say it's all about fighting game goodness, and I use the word good and goodness quite a bit, and that's just sort of like the kind of like a motto that I go by, because if you spread positivity and goodness with the games that you play, that people will learn to love and appreciate the games for what they are. So I will continue promoting SNK goodness in the region of Oceania.
Nice, man. And Taj, who is your waifu?
Blue Mary.
Are you going to get any heat for that? Like, is she an honest pick? Is she an honest woman?
So there is actually a bit of a story behind why Blue Mary, actually. So the story is, there was a girl, when I think it was at either university or not university, at a university or high school, one of those, that actually a girl that had the exact same haircut as Blue Mary that I actually had a crush on. So when I found that there was a character that had the exact same hairstyle, not personality-wise, but just hairstyle, it immediately made me think of that girl that I had a crush on. I think it was like a girl that I had probably like my first crush. And that's why I kind of think of Blue Mary, and she's my waifu. So it reminds me of my first crush.
Oh, hey, Taj, thank you so much, man. Is there anything you want to say, last words or shout outs to people, to the people that know you or the people that follow you? Let the people know what you're doing. Where can they find you?
Okay. So yeah, if you guys and girls want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter. So at TAJgarou, I think Drex has the information there. So I do stream as well. So twitch.tv/TAJgarou. I do try to stream as much as I can. Tuesdays are fighting game goodness. I try to keep them consistent. Whether it is KOF 15 focused, SNK games focused, or other fighting games related stuff. And I do also have a Discord, which I generally post out when I do my live streams. I generally try to keep things positive and exciting there. We talk about music, games, and other stuff. What other shout outs? I mean, I guess just shout outs to everyone in Australia, New Zealand, the whole Oceania region that is doing what they can to promote King of Fighters 15 and all things SNK in the region, whether it be hosting tournaments, hosting lobbies, training sessions with other players, whether it's online or offline, just playing SNK games. So massive shout outs to everyone there. Especially, I do also want to give a shout out to my my two sort of good friends who have been sort of giving me ideas, and we've been sort of bouncing off ideas about what we can do to raise SNK game profile in Australia. So my good friend Dark Chaotix, who makes really good combo videos. You should definitely check him out on Twitter and on YouTube, where you'll find his videos. And I've previously mentioned the current online KOF 15 champion, Chen Chen, who is doing a really, really good job and playing the game, and really solid player. And he also has a shop opening up soon in Sydney, where he will be hosting offline events once things get a little bit more better.
Nice.
So, yeah, I guess thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.